All right, so this talk is like officially named "Ode to Spare the Battery Every Day." It's a little bit of ecology in it, obviously. Like Max told you, my name is Manuel, but actually everybody calls me Stuff. So Stuff MC, that's what I'm on Twitter. But you might be here for dark mode, right? So you're wondering dark mode, what? And yeah, I'll talk about it, but later in the presentation. And it's not all about dark mode, right? But dark mode is the very funny part of this talk. So who am I? I'm a French-speaking guy with Spanish parents who was born in Belgium and lives in Germany since 17 years. I have to update that slide. 23 years as a dev, which makes me a little bit of a dinosaur, and half of it with the Apple technologies. So I love my phone. But more than that, I love the kind of work that I do since 8 or 9 years in the meantime with the Green Party in Germany. I've been for like 5 or 6 years a climate and refugee activist. The thing you see in my background, I'm not actually in the forest, but this is the Hambach forest, so it's one of the things that I'm involved in. So I also to make the full circle on the what I call sometimes the ethical bullshit. I've been 6 years without meat and half of it completely vegan. So this talk is a lot about ethics and a lot about what I call karma, actually. Speaking of which, I wrote a book called Karma-Based API on Apple platforms, which is all about privacy. So that's another talk that I give, that I might give for the Malt Academy at one time. If you look it up on apris.com or take a photo of that QR code, you will be able to look my coupon code. Oh, by the way, this coupon is not valid anymore, but if you want to have a coupon, just let me know. I forgot about this. So yeah, one thing I want to talk to you about is normally not the usual thing that I talk about, but it's more of website technologies, because I know some of you might be into web technos, and that's a big deal actually. There is this website called the website Carbon. I can obviously send all the links afterwards, which will show you what your website actually uses. Generally, there are different ways of computing this, but there's a very great article which I'm linking here, which computed that it's about 0.5 kilowatt-hour per gigabyte. So that's what the web consumes. So it means that every kilobyte, being that, if your website has 2 million visits, like in a month, which is possible for some, and that your website produces for every kilobyte, so a kilowatt hour. So it's a big thing. So if you could avoid sometime JavaScript or other stuff, that might be like a good thing. You could use website generators. I just mentioned Publish because this is an Apple app, where it's not from Apple, but it's generated in Swift. And the gist of it is website nowadays, they became huge. They became like those very big monolithic parts, like built with 3 million WordPress plugins. And so they're somewhat of an environmental catastrophe. Also, your CSS, it should be the smallest possible. If you can shoot for like what's less than 1 kilobyte, that would be awesome. Like if you think about it, 1 kilobyte of CSS is already a big thing. But that's just like general remarks. So my point is that we can change the world one phone at a time. Remember, I'm an iOS developer, so it's the main thing that I do. So I think in terms of phones. And if you can change your habits, another one will. And with over 2.2 billion iPhones, in this case, I should mention iPhones, because if you add the Android phones on top of it, it's way more than that. And I'll speak a little bit about Android as well. Actually, one phone can change the world. That's the point, the gist of it. So also devs definitely can, one line at a time. Like developers like me, if we think about the kind of code that we write, we have the potential of actually updating, changing the world actually. So developers should consider energy optimization as a priority, and I hope they do. And if they don't, remind them that. The one thing you can do on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone, is you can have a look right now on your phone in the settings app under battery. And that's basically where a user will go if the battery is draining. You don't want your app, if you're a developer, to be in this list. And if you see an app over there, start thinking about it. It's like the losers list, basically. So that's the way it looks. you have like the last 24 hours and the last 10 days, and then like the way the battery goes and then drain and it's being charged again. So the first app you see there in the list, Tiger Show, it's in Germany the biggest, the #1 news website, and it's from the first TV channel. So it's not only because the app has some problems and optimization, I would say, it's also because I am a news junkie being into politics. So this is the app that I use the most, actually. So on Android, or actually, I always say kind of as a joke, I don't have an Android phone, I just have a Fore phone. Actually, I have two, the Fore phone 2 and the Fore phone 3. So this is on my Fore phone 3, and this is what it was showing. So as you can see, it was showing the battery usage. The only thing was battery usage data isn't available. That's kind of weird. So I asked a friend of mine, so you can also show full device usage in this case. So I asked a friend of mine to show me that on his Android phone, which was running Android OS 10. I don't know why is it, so again, Android OS 9 is running on my Fore phone 3. Android OS 10 on the Pixel, which was not mine, so I am not the guy playing Forge of Empires all day long. Yeah, so now let's enter a little bit of theory of like what is actually energy, because I want you to know a couple of details. So maybe you can think about who this guy is, and I'm actually gonna have a look. Actually, I cannot, you know what? Oh, it's funny, my mouse actually moved, left the building. All right, so I'm actually gonna look now in the chat and ask you if anyone knows who that is. I'm gonna give you like 10 seconds and think about who that person might be. Actually, I can watch in the chat sometime now and then. And like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, because we're not gonna spend. No, it's not Benjamin Franklin, but well tried, Karim Pierre. It is actually Watt, James Watt. Being a Scottish, he wouldn't have been for Brexit, so we can actually go to the next person and ask again who that person is, because this guy is also very important, and we're going to speak about this guy also a little bit. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nobody. Let's go for Carl Siemens. So the thing is, Carl Siemens, this mix of a German guy in Great Britain, but then again, who am I to speak about mixed persons? He actually proposed the Watts unit. It was proposed by Carl Siemens, and he named it Watts in respect of this well-known scientist called James Watt. So the Watt is actually not made by Watts. So all right, so now let's speak about power. What I call power, like real power. Power, what is power? Power is when DexEd crashes on me. That's what it is. But luckily, because we had that and this is why we started a little bit later, I have a backup here, and we'll start again in like a second. Right. All right. So let's go this way. That should work actually. So let me see if we can go. I think there's a presentation. Yeah, slideshow. All right, let's go. So yeah, power. Power is the amount of energy at a specific time, like now, for example, right? So, and now you might think time. Well, yeah, time is in hours. I'm just gonna remove this little guy. I thought it would disappear at one point. This is probably only the way to leave this. Yeah, it's not helpful. All right, so in terms of hours, so what hour is what I want you to remember, because we're going to speak about this a little bit now and then. So what hour is not actually what, it shouldn't be a H over there, but it should be a W. And a lot of time people are confusing the concept of a watt and a watt hour. So the difference between energy and power. So the reason I wanted to speak about energy and power is that there's this timeline here that I'm showing you, which is what an app actually produces over time, like the number, the amount of power. So an app, the way it works is that it will have a certain amount of overhead, and every time it will do something, you have those green spikes, and the app is active, and so this is basically your work. And I mean, I'm usually giving this talk to developers, so that's why it says your work. The gist of it is apps most of the time have what I call the four non-fantastics. The way you can drain your battery is in terms of four things. And as a user, you can also pay attention to those four things: processing, networking, location, and graphics. So one of this is as a user, there's something relatively easy you can do is about app updates. Somehow we are in this very convenient world where everything automatically updates. So if you can avoid automatic updates, just go into settings and disable this. I think I have a slide just after that. Also, delete those apps you don't use. Turns out I just recently discovered there is a very handy way of deleting apps is when you're gonna do an update. So, and also we're gonna speak about timers a little bit later. Avoid apps, if you can, that use timers, like apps that do stuff automatically without you, like if you really wanna spare your battery. Obviously, it's not as convenient. So prefer apps with user interaction. So user interaction is like, obviously, it means you have to do something, right? So if you go on the iPhone in the iTunes and App Store part of your setting app, you will be able to switch off that app updates thing, right? And so that's very useful. Right, background apps. The way background apps works, some people might think that when you close an app, the app is closed, right? Like this is like, so the app is in foreground, this is the first thing, then it goes in the background. And some people would think, well, it goes in the background, it goes in the background, that's it, it's forever. But it's not. It's the so-called suspended mode, which actually means the app is turned off, can vary depending on what the developer did. So you would be amazed at how much many apps are using your power while they're not active, actually, or you think they're not active. One of the reasons of this is networking, for example. So if you can avoid streaming when you can, if you can download as much as you can, even for once, a good example of this is like Apple Music, for example. So if you first, like, music is a thing we keep on listening all the time, like we keep on listening to the same music, the same thing. So if you could download it before, that has two advantages. The number one is it's there offline when you don't have a connection, because even in 2020 we still don't have connection sometimes. And two, it's best for the world because you only download it once. You could argue that it takes space on your phone, but phone nowadays, they have so huge amount of space. Like most of us has a 64 gigabit phone. Some of us has a 256 gigabyte phone. Sorry. So it's not an argument anymore. Location is also another thing which drains battery. By location, I mean basically what most people understand as GPS. The question is, does the app needs to use constantly your location? Many apps actually only needs to know it once. A good example of this is like the weather app. It could ask you when they start, and actually, except for the functionality of a weather app that actually shows me the weather wherever I am currently. But if you're not somebody which is moving around all the time and you're staying in your city, or you're moving between 2-3 cities, then you shouldn't have the weather app taking your location all the time. And also, most don't need it in the background. So the background thing is an interesting one, which I will probably come back to it later if I remember correctly. Also, well, this is something you cannot do as a user. So that's a tricky part, because you could actually ask developers of apps what is the location accuracy that they use, because it turns out as a developer I can decide how precise my app uses a location. I can decide if my app knows where you precisely are up to the meter, I think, or something like that. Or I can decide the other side is like only 3 kilometers. And again, the weather app, it's enough to know that I'm in my city. The weather app doesn't have to know in which street I'm living. Well, maybe not for a city like Paris, but it's enough if it knows in which region of Paris you live. So that's the way an app would ask you on iOS, for example, and I'll come on Android after that. when you use the location. So it will first ask you not allow in. The one in the middle is new since iOS 13, so it's only 1 year old, and I really love this one. It's only once, like once per session. So it means the next time I will restart the app, it will ask me again. So I really love this one because this is the only way you have well, the only obvious way to know as a user that an app is actually going to use your location. The other one is allow while using apps. So this means the location is only going to be used when you actually see the app and not when it's in the background. And then after a while, you might have another request from an app, which will, after you have said allow while using once, allow while using app, you might have an always allow. And the always allow is the thing in the background. By the way, the strings over there, like the middle part of it, like the non-bold part, like the app's explanation, and also to secretly know where you are, even if the app isn't being used. This is me as a developer who wrote this, right? I could have wrote, I want to know where your cat is, or whatever. All right, so let's move to that robot guy. Until now on Android, and when I say until now, I mean until Android OS 10, which is the current version. Android OS 11 isn't out yet, even though it's in beta. Apps can always use the background, which when I learned about this, I was freaked out because it was, for me, it was really weird. This isn't the case on iOS since many, many years. It's, I think, since iOS 8, that it's not the case anymore. Yeah, so we have background apps since iOS 4, but we have the prompt since iOS 3, iOS 8, sorry. Also on Android, good to know, also battery-wise, but privacy-wise, if you need Bluetooth, you're going to need to ask for location. Until now, I think if I remember correctly, it changes in Android OS 11 as well. It's not like I hate everything happening on Android. There are amazing stuff on Android, no question about it, but there are a couple of stuff which are privacy-wise and battery-wise very interesting, if I should say. So actually the first time that I was kind of trying to convert to the Fore phone, which I never made because I couldn't. I was wondering why so many apps were asking my location even though I didn't see the point. And it was because the apps were using Bluetooth, because up until recently, this was the same thing. So my guess, and I haven't checked that, the current, all the COVID's app that are using your Bluetooth API, maybe the official Google API doesn't ask you for a location because it's a Google API, so maybe they worked around it. But if it would be a normal app, it would ask your location. Again, we all copy from each other. And this was a very smart move from Android to copy iOS in this case. iOS also has copied things from Android over the past. Think about the notification center, for example. But this one is really awesome because it really looks like on iOS. So it's the same. It's only this time while using the app and then deny, right? That's what's coming in Android 11. The difference though, the problem though with Android is that it's going to take forever until people are using Android 11. Like I'm writing an app right now for a customer with a Android colleague of mine, and we define the app as iOS 13 upwards, like even 13.5, because it turns out only 10% of the people of the iOS users right now only have an earlier version of iOS than iOS 13. On Android, my dear colleague has to support 7, Android 7. So it has to support 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 because it's basically 20% for 7, 20% for 8, and so on and so forth. It's very, very different. So who is using my location? You can notice if you go in, again, in the settings app, in privacy, and then in location services. Over there, you will see the list of apps that are using your location, right? The first one is the Maps app. The second one is an app I built to demonstrate some of this stuff. This is the app that goes with my book, My Privacy. And also, yeah, if the color of the arrow is important because it means it's written over there, right, in the screenshot, like all over row indicates that an item may receive your location under certain conditions, and the other one has been recently used, and the gray one is in the last 24 hours. And it's at the yeah, at the top right. All right, so the location means basically that whenever the location is used, that the battery is consumed, right? Because the radio has to start, and then that's a piece of hardware, and then yeah, so that's draining your battery. Yes, and so on Android, it's a little bit more confusing. Actually, you have to go in apps and notification and then advanced. And I'm sure it changes from Androids to Androids because that's Android. There is no one single Android. That's on my Fore phone, which is a pretty much stock Android. If I remember correctly, it's comparable to Google Pixel 3a. So you go in app permissions, and then you go in location, and then over there, as I was telling you, there is a switch to say yes or no. There is no, up until now, that's Android OS 9, but as far as I know, it's the same in Android OS 10. There is no like different level of protections. All right, so let's skip this and let's move on to graphics. All right, if you can, try to not use an external display. Who am I to tell you this? I am right now using an external display, but this is exactly why. Because I'm gonna tell you exactly what am I doing wrong right now. So how much does your screen consume? Like this beautiful 27-inch ultrafine 5K monitor that I have for my everyday use actually consumes 200 watts. So it means that if it's plugged in for like 10 hours a day, which is probably is, I'm consuming 2 kilowatt per day only for this guy. That's kind of crazy, right? Because if you compute the price of energy in Germany, which is 30 cents per kilowatt hours, I know if I remember correctly, our energy is pretty expensive, but that's about 200 euro per year. So that's what we call the TCO, the total cost of ownership. So outside of the ecological impact of this, there is a money impact. So it means that monitor back in the days in 2017 costed, I think, 1,000 euro. 5 years later, it will cost the double, basically. And I will probably have this monitor for 10 years all in total. And the price of the monitor will be basically around, 3,000 euro over the 10 years. Yeah, and also blur usage. If your app is using blur, or if any app is using a blur usage, it means battery usage. So what is blur? So let's say the difference between a real blur, which is taken with a camera with a lens. So the blur is the effect you see in the background. Well, that's very cheap because it's an optical thing, right? But that's computed blur. Obviously, there is no lens on your iPhone, so that's a computed blur. This effect you see there. So it means the image has math applied to it. One-time blur means less energy, but it's terrible if a video is played and then you have a blurred background, because then every single image of the video has to be blurred. So the image renders each frames, and then at the end it's like in terms of battery consumption. Avoid video if you can. I love this slide because like avoid video in 2020, right? The point is like video is the biggest battery killer, really. It is. Why? Because pixels are moving, basically. So unless your video is very black, which will come back when we speak about dark mode. Especially with persistent UI control. This screenshot you see in the background is actually the Tag a Show app that I was telling you about. It's basically, think about TF1 in France, for example. It's a very, very successful app, and it has, it doesn't use what I call the bare bone player from iOS. It actually, it actually puts persistent UI on top of it. Now I want to show you a few things that developers have, but very quickly, because I don't want to get too much into the details. I have other talks for that, for developers specifically. Developers have, like developers like me on iOS, we have this this kind of thing in Xcode. So we know when we develop our app, the impact of our app. We know how much CPU and GPU and location and network is used, and the display and whatnot. Very confusing colors if you're colorblind like me, because I can never tell the difference between CPU and display. But anyways, apparently nobody's colorblind at Apple. And also we can know the application state. If you look at the bottom of the screenshot, there's the application state, which is background, foreground, and suspended. And the terminal state, because this is something I don't speak a lot, but battery consumed means your device is hot. So it's not good for your device to be in your pocket, for example. And everybody knows batteries, they explode now and then. So like I was saying, they have this foreground, background suspended thing where we can actually see this. And the other thing developers have is they have so-called metrics. So from a version to the other, here you see only one version, but it could be like different version. We can actually see the top battery drain. It means in this example, this is an app from a friend of mine. It means if you use the app the whole day, it will drain 1.7% of your battery, for example. So right, all right, dark. It's time to go to dark mode. The average pixel level is an important thing. It means basically when it's low, it means a pixel hasn't been lit up, right? So it means less battery consumption. That is only working on OLED displays. What are OLED displays? So the difference between a LED display, like a regular LED, is actually has to be lit up, like even to have with a black light. So even to have black, we need to light up the display. So I'm not gonna go too much into the details, but the gist of it is that OLED display, every single LED is has its own light, so to say. So right, so it means if you want to have a black pixel on an OLED display, you just don't turn the pixel on, right? If you want to have a black pixel on a LED display, well, you will still have this huge background light, which makes the display light. It's the same for TVs, even though OLED TVs are, I think, very expensive. But it's interesting because we see a couple of OLED displays on TV, but we don't see a lot of computers using OLED displays. Certainly, no Macs, for example, which makes me sad. There's a link that I can share also, which is when a dark theme can save battery power. I'm missing an E here. And it's actually for people using some Windows PCs, which actually have OLED displays, and Windows has some stuff in there. I want to show you a comparison, which I actually borrowed from Google. This is why the iPhone 7 has a bad reputation here, because Google back in the days when what's a little bit ironic is that the iPhone 10 was already out, but they explicitly took the iPhone 7 to do this comparison with the Pixel, the Google Pixel. So what they did is they compared a phone, the Google Pixel, which had already OLED, with a phone which doesn't have it, like the iPhone 7, and showed you that in maximal brightness and normal mode, you have barely any you spare barely any batteries, but in night mode, which is the dark mode, you had a big spare. So they did the same thing with the YouTube video post. The reason why it was post it was because so that it's not images moving all the time. And also they discovered that when it's post, that's very interesting fact, they layer like a dark thing on it, which makes it a little bit darker, so it actually has a bigger impact. And that's a set of tips and tricks for any kind of laptops. Reduce your display brightness, you'll be surprised. And also dim the keyboard backlight off. It drives me crazy when I see people that have this keyboard backlight. It's really small in this case. The amount of energy you will spare over there, we're not gonna save the world with the backlight, but it just doesn't make sense to light up this keyboard. And don't get me wrong, I love backlit keyboards. I love that I have the ability to turn it on, and I do it once in a while when I'm in the dark, but not during the day. All right, let's move to a little bit of Windows laptops battery life. I think I found that on a website from Microsoft. I should have the reference in my notes. Dark theme could lead you to crank your laptop's brightness to read text, and the higher brightness would draw more power from the battery. So it's kind of weird because I just told you all the good stuff about the dark theme, and now I'm telling you, well, the problem with the dark theme might be that some people would crank, the lights, and so it would consume more battery. And also, Yeah, again, like I was telling you, if you have to consider one thing in terms of what a laptop consumes or what a phone consumes, it's the same thing. That's the display, right? The display doesn't consume. The display consumes any more than anything else. Windows has a battery saver mode, which you can actually activate if you go in the battery settings. And yeah, this way, which there is something similar on iOS. I'll come back to it. Oh, sorry, on macOS. And also you can also check which app are using the most battery. Same thing with macOS. I'll come back again. It only says that this feature isn't available in Windows 7, but I was thinking Windows what? Because I'm hoping that not so many people are still using Windows 7. All right. The MacBook Pro from Apple loves your battery. That's what it's supposed to say. And there's one thing you can check on the Macs is the cycle count. So if you go in about this Mac and you change it with Alt to System Information, or if you just call System Information, it's an app, you will have a list of stuff which are not all very interesting, but one of them is power, and it's the cycle count. So anybody could actually, that has a MacBook Pro in front of his eyes now, could look at it and see the number. So don't be freaked out if your number is not that as low as mine. This is one I did on my fairly new, I think I bought it in February or March, MacBook Pro 16-inch. So it's normal that I only have a cycle count 10. You might have 100, 200. There are websites that tell you how much cycle count you kind of are allowed to have, so to say. But also the other thing is, if you click on the battery on the menu bar on macOS, it will tell you the condition of the battery. I think it's when you click with Alt, actually. It will tell you the condition is normal. Normal is everything is okay, and you can actually see replace soon. I've never seen that. You can also see other stuff like this. On the Mac, something you could do is also going in the application monitor and on the activity monitor, and there is a tab called energy. And over there, you'll see what's using energy. In my case, it's always Firefox because I'm very bad at closing tabs. So if you're better than me at closing tabs, you are better than me ecologically seen, because yeah, a browser is what is basically using a lot. And in this case, Apple Mail is not known to be a very optimized app. So that's why it's the second one. On the Mac, there is also the energy saver, which there are a couple of stuff which you can do. You can turn the display after so and so many minutes. You can also not enable power nap and so on and so forth. Power nap is something which is cool in a way. It's very nice. It runs some processes like checking your email, your calendar, and stuff like that while the Mac is closed. But it's weird because it means the Mac is actually still running while you think it's not running. So it's draining your battery. It's being warm. Yeah, and for example, every evening I unplug my screen from my Mac, because otherwise, if it's plugged, even though it's closed, and I clicked on sleep, it will wake up the Mac actually. So it's not very ideal. I'm coming back to the subject of OLED on phones, because you might wonder, okay, but I don't know which phones have OLED. And I told you it arrives on the iPhone 10, but it's not really completely true. So a lot of people have Samsung Galaxies. They have their flagships have had OLEDs forever. I think since the S8 or something like that. But obviously, not all of their phone, like the more cheap phones, don't have OLED, right? On the iPhone, it's a little bit more confusing. Well, yes and no. So the higher range, so it means the 10, the 10s, the 10s Max, the 11, and the 11 Pro, they do have it. But the like of the lower range, well, if you have anything which has a button, a home button, it doesn't have it, right? So that's very easy. But if you have something which has a notch, it doesn't mean you have it. Like the XR and the 11, which is basically the XR, again, they don't have it. The good news, though, is apparently the rumors are saying any iPhone 12 will have it, so everybody will have it. And I really hope that very soon we will have only OLED phones. Google used OLED displays for its Pixel also since 2016, so that's a good news. So yeah, Android was first in terms of OLED, but yeah, it's no surprise. One of the reasons is like Samsung, it's also no surprise because they do the displays, right? So, and again, that's an interesting statistic. They saw battery life saving between 15 and 60% when moving YouTube's default white background to dark. So companies like Google, when they do something, when they change something, and especially, and if you build website and if you support dark themes in CSS, there is a lot of options now in the meantime to know if somebody is running his phone or his computer in light or dark theme. If you support dark theme, then you have a big impact, especially if you're building a very, very big website. So that's why my iPhone runs dark. And I'm almost done. That's amazing. So we'll have time for Q&A, or I could show you some stuff. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is about headphones. It's a simple stuff, but I like to remind people to, if they can, avoid Bluetooth. See, Max is doing it. Actually, it's wonderful. You have an old school cable. That's wonderful. That's a good example that I have here. Some headphones, like this amazing headphone from Bose, is actually Bluetooth, but it also has a cable which you can actually unplug. Because of the virtual background, you don't see it, but yeah, you can unplug this, and so I plug it all the time to my Mac. Obviously, I cannot plug it to my phone. Well, I could probably if I have this adapter, like this lightning adapter. But yeah, so that's why I use it. And again, use a 3.5mm cable if you can, as long as we can. I don't know how long, or a lightning USB cable, worst case. I'm gonna skip on this one because it's a little bit, it's a video, so it's not gonna translate very well, but it was basically Arnold Schwarzenegger speaking about ecology and whatnot. And that means thank you in Arabic. So want to thank everybody. If there are questions, shoot them at me. I don't know if Max, you saw questions or not.
Nothing popped up yet, so
yeah.
If anything does come up, I do have a question, maybe just to get the round started. Obviously, not everybody has the insights that you just shared with us, right? So I think that the classic consumer especially doesn't have that. What do you think needs to happen for also the industry, to incentivize the industry to change, right? Because I think as long as, for example, Google or Apple doesn't necessarily proactively push these things, the consumer will probably also not have. Is there an incentivization for them to do that?
Well, it starts with, so anytime you want to speak about some kind of ethical thing, you need to have an incentive, and especially as a freelancer, you learn how to sell that to your customer, right? Because when I give this talk to developers, or when I give a talk about privacy, they first ask me, so how can I sell that? And a lot of time, well, in the meantime, it became easier because being a good guy is something that actually sells. And we live in days where you can actually profit economically if you're saying, like Apple, that they are 100% renewable, right? That's one thing. The other thing is in terms of any devices, there is a double impact of not only is it good for nature and whatnot, but it's also good because your device lasts longer. But it's a right question you ask. I'm not sure about Google, but Apple has been doing since now 3 years talks about energy optimization. That's the only reason actually, or the main reason why I started, is because I saw a couple of years ago, it's only one talk, but it's like with privacy. They started with one talk and it's becoming a bigger one. That's why I like, there is this, if you guys look up the Greenpeace Greener Electronics, there is this this report. It's sadly it's only from 2015, so I hope it's going to be updated soon. But if you look it up, I'm gonna look it up here. So it's Greenpeace. I'll show you something which is very interesting actually. Guide to Greener Electronics. So I have to share my screen again. Share screen. And I'm going to share the desktop too. Oh, that's interesting. The first link wasn't a good one. So let me use, in this case, Google, because sometimes it's better. Yeah, all right, so let me share. So I usually use Lilo or Ecosia instead of Google for searching. So now you should see my screen. What's happening here? I don't know.
Seems a little frozen.
Yeah, it is. Actually, the whole Google UI is frozen. That's very interesting. So let me see. Let me check out. Greener electronics, Greenpeace, because this is something I should have mentioned in my talk, which I really, really like. Yeah, Guide to Greener Electronics. So this one is really great because it shows what companies have been doing, and I'm lucky enough that I picked the right company a couple of years ago. Before even being a green guy, I was an Apple guy, and nowadays it's more the other way around. I care more about the planet than I care about Apple. So it means if I would be developing apps for Huawei, for example, I would probably feel very bad, or there's another very bad guy here. So yeah, I mean, but that's a good example which goes against what I just said, because Amazon is an ecological catastrophe and they still make a lot of money. But I think, yeah, like Google is better than many people would think they are, for example. And yeah, so check this
probably
out.
Needs a common effort, right, of consumers.
Well, it does.
Also politics.
Yeah, it does. So that's why I'm happy that that actually, in terms of the COVID, for example, they joined the forces together, Google and Apple, right? So you would hope that they join forces for other themes like privacy and energy.
Yeah, definitely. We have one more question in the chat. Yeah. Would you have some tips for UI designers on how to design to improve the energy optimization?
So number one, again, dark mode. Like really, it's many people, and it could be so, and I'm sure it's like that on some Android devices, that the default theme would be dark instead of well, on iOS it asks you when you start, it asks you what you want. And so if you are somebody which does UX, you can actually do a lot of stuff in dark mode. Other than that, yeah, obviously, or UI designers, other than that, obviously small images, right? And I'm going to show you something which is very interesting, which is, wait, this is, I just forgot how it's called. There is a website which is a very, very simple, it's a funny website. It's a hilarious website, which is a very basic website. And so sometime, so let me show you an example, which is high caffeinated or something like that. I think it's called. Geez, I need to look at a link. Let me see, because I want to show you something simple. If I can find the link over there. I have to restart DexSet, which crashes on us, and then I will have the link to this. Yo, okay, I found it. Need to open the right thing. Yo, this one, and then this one. All right, so I found the link. So there is that's something I'm going to speak about just after that. That's one of the websites that I use, for example, to search things. And if you look at the website, it's actually very simple. You know, like it's totally the opposite than most websites nowadays. For some of you, it might look like it doesn't look good, and sure, it could use some CSS to, I don't know, like have rounded like corners or whatever. But it doesn't have to have like if I'm sure if you look at the code, it's yeah, it's fairly simple, right? It doesn't load any huge image. You could also, those tools that I'm showing now, they are also great. Like this network tool, for example, and other stuff like that. They actually show you the size of the request and whatnot. So yeah, and the yeah, graphics and all the stuff like this. Yeah, so there are many resources out there. In terms of designing to do it right. Yeah, again, like Google for like CSS dark mode, for example, that's something web designers dark mode in CSS. Like there's a media preference that says prefers color scheme dark, and then you can have your website change. Because, for example, on the Mac, because it doesn't make any difference, I don't have actually the I'm not running in dark mode, but if I now go in dark mode, because it's not an OLED display, you will see that this website adapts and it still looks good. Whereas this website, for example, ironically, doesn't adapt. So it's kind of the irony of the website which speaks about dark mode and doesn't support dark mode. But yeah, this website adapted, for example, you see. So and I'm guessing the one from Greenpeace doesn't, which is funny as well. So yeah, and it's a very simple trick. It's like I'm knowing what the preference the user is. In this case, it doesn't make a difference in the Mac again, because it doesn't have an OLED display, right? But if I would look at this on a phone, and this website would be a very famous website, like if I remember correctly, Facebook doesn't have any support for dark mode, for example. That's a company who could change the world for the better in this case. Yeah.
Sounds good. Mathilde also just mentioned a good example is also eco-branding. With ink saved, when creating logo, for example, or ink saving fonts, that can save about 25% of ink usage.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, the gist of it is, if we, I would say the responsible people are in place in some companies and are basically saying stuff where during meetings where other people wouldn't say anything. We can change stuff. Like I'm always amazed. I talk so much when I'm somewhere about ecology and veganism and whatnot, that at one point I have some random meat eater colleagues that are coming to me and telling me, hey, I've been vegetarian since 2 months. So it pays. And again, it's easier now, all those stuff like energy and privacy, than it used to be 5 years ago, because of Greta, among other stuff like Fridays for Future, and the activists in the trees in my back over there. It's all those people made it for us, the people that are more on the business side of the stuff, easier to argument, because I am like nowadays when I tell a colleague, if you're going to buy an Android phone, then please buy a Fore phone. There's nobody anymore saying, oh no, why the Fore phone? I'd rather buy a Huawei or a Samsung. A lot of them will go like, yeah, right, I'll buy a Fore phone. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to like probably slowly wrap up is, yeah, the choice of your hardware. There's basically like 2 choices to make. On the mobile phone, it's either your Android or your iOS in terms of what you like. If you like iOS, feel okay about it, because ecologically and energy-wise and so on and so forth, as the Greenpeace report shows you, it's actually Apple, which is almost as good as Fairphone. Even in terms of renewable energies, they are actually better. And if you like Android, give a shot at a Fairphone. Really, it's probably technically not the best phone in the world, but it's a very decent phone, the Fairphone 3. They're getting better at a lot of stuff. And in terms of laptop, like computer, there is Windows and there is macOS. Pick your camp, so to say. If you like macOS, also don't feel bad about ecology, because Apple is doing a lot of good stuff. Also reusing, for example, aluminium and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, they do a bunch of bad stuff as well. The AirPod is an example of this. It's totally not recyclable. And if you use Windows, as Greenpeace was showing you, prefer Dell or HP actually. Dell and HP are actually apparently pretty good in a lot of stuff. Lenovo and Microsoft is also just after them. But yeah, prefer that to an Asus, for example, which is not as good.